Hey, this is Jess from Make and Do Crew, and for this scarf we're going to be using merino yak alpaca yarn, which is part of the LB collection by Lion Brand. So to get started with this scarf, we're going to make a loop of 4 chains, and alternatively you can always make a magic circle or a magic loop as well, but this is definitely just the simple beginner way of making a circle to start working, kind of like you're working in the round, but in this case we're going to work in rows. So I made 4 chains there, and I'm going to slip stitch them together, and as I'm working the next stitches I'm just going to work over this tail so I don't have to weave it in at the end. So to get started, on every row we're always going to chain 4, and that is going to count as 1 double crochet and 1 chain 1 space. So we've got 4 there, and now I'm going to double crochet, and this double crochet is going to kind of be a post that we work sort of a variation of a bead stitch around. So to do this, these are my initial chains, here's my double crochet, and I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to work around the post of this double crochet and pick up the yarn again. So now I have 3 loops on my hook, and I'm going to do that 2 more times. So I'm going to yarn over, come under here, pick up another loop, so now I have 5 loops, yarn over, come under the post, pick up another loop, so now I have 7 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull my yarn through. So what this does is create kind of like it's like a sideways bobble on the double crochet stitch. So let's try that again. In between every little bead stitch like this, we're going to chain. So I'm going to chain 1, and then we're going to make another double crochet in the circle, and that's going to be what we work our bead stitch on. So to do that bead stitch, I'm going to yarn over, work around the post. So I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over again, go around the post, pick up the yarn, now I have 5 loops. Little tail's getting in my way. I'm going to yarn over one more time, go back around that post, and now I have 7 loops. So I'm going to yarn over one last time and pull it through all of my loops. So now we have 2 of these they're a variation on the bead stitch. We have 2 of those going. So I'm going to chain, and we're going to do that same thing 2 more times. So we've got a double crochet here, and then yarn over and work around the post. We've got 3, yarn over around the post, 5, yarn over and around the post, 7, and pull my working yarn through. Now every once in a while you'll kind of get something else caught in there, and you can kind of decide this one looks a little funky, so I might just take it back to where I started with the double crochet and just work my yarn overs again. There's just so many loops on your hook that sometimes the hook can kind of get confused and go through the wrong thing. So we're going to work 4 total bobbles on this row, and so because this is our first row and in the middle of it we're always going to be chaining 4, and that's going to kind of make the tip of that triangle point form. So we've got 4 chains in the middle instead of 1, and then we're going to do another one of these kind of bead bobbles here by working a double crochet. I'm going to yarn over, I have 3 loops, 5 loops, 7 loops, and then pull my yarn through everything that's on my hook. So what I've created here is 2 bobbles over here, a little bit bigger space with chain 4, and then another bobble. So I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to work my last little double crochet bead bobble, and then we'll be ready to end this row. So to end each row we're always going to work a chain 1 and then a double crochet. And this double crochet you're going to want to keep pretty loose because it's going to be the top edge of your scarf, and you want to make sure it's not pulling too tightly and causing the triangle to sort of be a little bit warped. So that's nice and loose, and now we're going to add additional rows on top here, and that's what's going to form our triangle. So to start a new row I'm going to chain 4 just like we did at the beginning of this one. I've got 4 chains there, and I'm going to turn this around, and we're going to work into all the chain spaces here. So my first chain space, if you'll remember, we just chained 1 right here, so this is my first chain space. So I'm going to work a double crochet into this, and that's going to become our first little bobble of this row. So I've got one going here, and in each row of the scarf, we're going to increase one of these bobbles on either side of the triangle. So we had 2 before, so this one should have 3. And that's one way you can count those and keep track if you think you've maybe messed up somewhere. So we've got another chain 1 space right here, so I'm going to work another little bobble. So now we're at the chain 4 space of the triangle, so we know that's kind of the point of our triangle scarf. So I'm going to work a double crochet in there and turn that into a bobble. And then because this is our point, I'm going to chain 4 instead of chaining 1. And that, if it helps you remember where this is at, if you have a hard time seeing that this is chain 4, you can always put a marker here and just move it with each row you work. But what's always going to happen in that chain 4 space is you work 1 bobble, chain 4, and then you work a second bobble in the same space. So that requires another double crochet, and then I'm going to work around the post of that to make the bobble. And what that has done is just transitioned this bigger space down, and that's going to continue down to the point of the bottom of our scarf. So as I keep going here, I have another chain 1 space that I'm going to work a double crochet and then a bobble on that. And then we have one more chain 1 space here, because if you remember, if you turn this around, at the beginning of this first row we chained 3 plus 1 to be a chain 1 space. So that was a double crochet and a chain 1 space. So that last little turning chain that you come to at the end of each row is always going to have a bobble stitch worked into it. So I've already chained 1, I'm going to double crochet here, work this bobble, and then just like we did in the last row, we're going to end this with a chain 1 and then a very relaxed double crochet. So as you can see now, this is forming a little bit of a crescent kind of triangle shape. And this scarf is actually just going to continue in the same pattern. So each row, you can tell here, we started with 1, 2, 1, 2. So there was 2 on each side, and now we have 1, 2, 3 on either side. So you should be increasing by 1 bobble on each side and then switching colors accordingly as described in the written pattern. And if you need the written pattern, you can always find it on makeanddocrew.com. Okay, so now I've come to the end here of this row. So I worked my last bobble and a chain space, and now I need to do my last loose double crochet. So I'm going to begin that double crochet just as I normally would, but instead of working this final yarn over with this navy yarn, I'm going to switch to my second color, and I'm going to just use that to yarn over and complete the double crochet. And what this does is make sure it's a clean color change so that there's no little bits of navy peeking up in the green row. So now I've kind of officially switched. I'm just going to hold on to these while I chain 4 so that neither of them gets pulled super loose. And now I've chained 4, and I can turn this, and just like we have in the previous rows, I'm going to just double crochet here in the first chain 1 space and then work a bobble stitch. And I can snip my navy yarn now because I've transitioned to this new sage color. So that is all there is to it. You're going to just cruise along just like this, increasing 1 bobble per row until your scarf is the size you want it to be, or until you reach the end of the written pattern if you're doing it exactly as I have. Okay, so when all the rows of your scarf are complete, you're going to want to block it to make it a nice triangle shape. And when it's done blocking, you can weave in the ends by, what I did is just kind of thread them into the bobble and then work back and forth in the bobble a few times to make them secure. And that has hidden them pretty well. So our last task is to make 2 tassels to put on the corners of the triangle. And what I'm going to use for that is this toilet paper tube, and I've cut this to about 3.5 inches. So you should have a little bit of each color of yarn left. I'm going to use mustard here, and I'm going to wrap it around this toilet paper tube about 35 times. So once you've got that all wrapped up, you're going to take maybe like a 10-inch piece of yarn and thread it underneath all the pieces you've wrapped around, and tie it in a nice solid knot. And you want this piece to have a little bit of tails because this is what you're going to use to attach it to the scarf. These are going to be what you tie it on and then weave in with. So once that's tied, I'm going to make sure this is centered, and then I'm just going to use my scissors to cut this down the middle. So now we have a nice little wig or a tassel, and I'm going to keep leaving these tails out and use a slightly shorter piece of yarn to wrap around the tassel like this and tie it a few times, and that's what's going to create that little ball at the top. Okay, so then you can trim your tassel if you want to make all the yarn even, and then you're just going to use these tails here to attach it in each corner of the triangle, not the center where you were chaining for, but each corner. So you can kind of tie it on there and then weave in the ends, and you're done. Thanks so much for watching, and if you'd like more free crochet patterns and tutorials, please subscribe below.